Welcome back to Kick and Crochet. Today I'm going to show you how to start and finish a Tunisian triangle shawl, or at least how I did this one. So first, to start, you're going to need a Tunisian crochet hook and some yarn. So this one is my favorite. It's a Furls Tunisian. I have no idea how to pronounce it. Padouk. I don't know. It's a pretty wood. Anyway, this is my crochet hook, and this yarn I got from one of my knit crates. So I'm going to start with just a chain of 8 to get started here. I'm going to pick up a stitch in each chain, just like a regular Tunisian foundation. So I should have 8 stitches on my hook. I should also have said that a stitch marker is a great idea. So this is a mistake that I personally made a lot when I learned Tunisian, and I actually still make if I don't use a stitch marker. So when you start your return pass, when you do your chain 1, I like to place a stitch marker in here because my most frequent mistake is where my last stitch is. So I put my stitch marker in there so I know I'm going to go through both those loops on the way back. Okay, now my return pass is just normal. This is just my foundation row to get started. And your Tunisian triangle shawl could use any number of stitches. I'm going to do just Tunisian simple stitch with this one. So I'm going to have increases on each end and in the middle. So I'm going to start with a yarn over, which will be my first increase, and then I'll do Tunisian simple stitch for 1, 2, and now these 2 are my 2 center stitches. Right? I've got 4 loops on my hook, so now I'm going to do another yarn over, a Tunisian simple, another one. So I did my 2 center stitches, and you could mark those with a stitch marker too if it's helpful. Then another yarn over for my other increase for the middle, then simple stitch, and one more yarn over before my end. So every row I'm going to have 4 increases. Now chain 1, move my stitch marker, and now close normally by yarning over and pulling through 2 loops until I reach the end of the row. So my return pass for this project is always the same. I'm doing all of my increases on my forward pass, so my return pass is normal. So now you can see it's starting to fan out a little bit. It's getting a little bit of shape. And on my actual scarf, I use DK weight yarn. This is worsted, so it's a little bit thicker, but that's okay. Okay, so now again, on the very end, I'm going to start with a yarn over because I need to increase on each end. Then I need to go through this, which was the loop from my previous yarn over. So I'm going to pick up a stitch there. Otherwise, I won't keep increasing. Now I'm just going to do a Tunisian simple stitch. Now I'm coming up to the middle, so here, these are my 2 center stitches. This was my previous yarn over, so I'm going to do a stitch in my previous yarn over, then I'm going to yarn over one more time, do my 2 center stitches, yarn over, a stitch in that yarn over, and I'm going to do Tunisian simple stitch until I get to the last stitch in my row. Then I'll do a yarn over and go through my last stitch. Chain 1, move my stitch marker, and it's important that you go through both stitches because the edge of this is going to show, and it's going to look a lot neater if you go through both. It's going to look like a regular stitch, just like on the other side. So you want to go through both stitches on your end, or both loops of that stitch on your end. So especially the first few rows, I think it's helpful to count your stitches just to make sure you're increasing 4 every row. But now you can see that it's getting bigger, and we're kind of off to the races now. So we're getting the pattern down. And as you go, you'll start being able to identify those middle stitches easier. So if you want to put a stitch marker there, you can, but otherwise you'll start to get it. So I'll do one more row here, of our setup row. So again, I'm going to yarn over through the first loop. That was our previous yarn over, and I'm just doing Tunisian simple stitch all the way until I get to my center 2 stitches. Now before I do my middle 2 stitches, I'm going to yarn over again, then do my middle 2, yarn over again, and then Tunisian simple all the way to the other end. And you can start the shawl with a straight hook like I'm using right now, but eventually you're going to need to use a hook with extender cables. Okay, I'm on the last stitch. I need to yarn over and then do the last stitch. If not, just because of the length of the shawl, because it will definitely get too long for this hook, but also because of the bend that we're creating in the middle, it's going to get a little bit awkward. So you can see it's already starting to poof out. And it will do that even with the extender cable, because it has to still go over the straight part of the hook, but it's just going to be a little bit more comfortable with an extendable hook eventually. Okay, so this is just kind of the basic principle for a triangle shawl. It is also the specific start of this purple one that I showed you. But you could do this with any stitches that you wanted. It doesn't have to be Tunisian simple stitch. And this will end up flat on the outside here. Now if you did a taller stitch, like a Tunisian double crochet or Tunisian triple crochet or something like that, then you might need to have more increases. But for any of the smaller stitches, knit stitch, simple stitch, reverse stitch, purl stitch, then this will work to do 4 increases on every row. So 2, 1 on either side of the center stitches, and 1 before the end on each side. And now I'm going to set that aside, and I'm going to show you how I finish this. So when you're all done, you don't, I mean maybe you do, but I don't like to have this kind of loop here. And so we're going to close that up with our yarn tail and a tapestry needle. So I'm just going to thread this needle. And if you remember, we started with 8 stitches. So I'm going to skip the first 4, and then I'm going to go kind of in and out of the last 4, and then I'm going to come back here and go in and out the first 4, and I'm going to just cinch this up, except I just made a loop. Okay. So that flattens it out, straightens it out, makes it nicer, and you can kind of go a couple more times if you want. Maybe I split my yarn when I did it, so that's not ideal, but it is what it is. Sometimes that happens. Okay, and then I will just tie this off and weave in my end, and that will be the end. I've got a nice flat edge on my scarf, theoretically, when I tie that off. And then I can block that out and it will just look lovely. Nobody will even know that it started with that weird U shape. So that is how I start and end a Tunisian triangle shawl. I hope you found this review helpful. Happy crocheting!